Yeah.
Yeah, we see your screen.
Okay. Let's try this again.
Let's try it again. Yeah. And
Here we go.
Matt, actually try it in the option settings. See if you can in the top bar. See if you can disable annotations by others.
Okay, I believe it's done.
Okay.
All right.
Go ahead. Sorry about that.
Here we go. So I thought, yeah, for this first one, to kind of have a share that I think would be better for everybody kind of seeing us off for the first time, I go through a brief history of engineering. I'm trying to do this really quick. Brief history of engineering here at Reserve, specifically like the RPay, the consumer-facing side. So kick it off. Some of you may already know this as well, depending on how long you've been around, but in early 2020, the application that was out and available that people were using was this thing that we've called RPay. And it was a modified chat app that kind of had these payment features added in. It was clunky, it had minimal features. It was pretty difficult to use. Dug up a screenshot. I don't know, this kind of like makes me cringe looking back on it.
That's pretty. That's really pretty.
Yeah, this was used to see how this application would be received. People were using this, started getting a little bit of popularity, and that led us into about mid 2020, where the decision was made to take everything that we learned from this initial kind of experimental application and make a better system from the ground up. And we started calling the system RPay. Some of it just to separate it from it being RPay, because we wanted to leave RPay behind and be in a new world of RPay. Just 2 engineers built the MVP for this, with 3 main components: that app, the API that drove the app, and the desk, which we call the administrative tool for things like customer service, problem solving, settings, all kinds of stuff. And in about late 2020, RPay went live. Still, we had just 2 engineers doing everything. You can see we had some pretty substantial visual improvement, functionality improvement. We started, with the ability to build something that was more tailored to its use case, as opposed to like adapting an existing application to work. It turned out a lot better. They started picking up early to mid 2021. RPay started growing. We started hiring engineers, went from 2 to about 5 engineers. And with that scale of growth and basically the amount of traffic we were receiving, we spent a fair amount of time overhauling like the backend engine. This was sort of like a phase where we had a major upgrade of our backend system to support all of the traction that we were getting. This is also when our desk, which I have a snapshot here of, kind of like started to really mature as well. It really became this like full-fledged, functionally usable system by our backend. There's a lot of like tooling in there that's going on. Late 2021, we had an aggressive push to get to iPhone. Up till now, we had just been on Android, and we're super excited to release on iPhone. We took the opportunity while we were porting everything and making it compatible with iPhone to also do a pretty substantial UX upgrade to the entire app, which gets us to that look that people are probably more familiar with now, the version that's out. A lot more mature, a lot more modern looking, things again, more organized and easier to use. So where are we at now? We've got 10 full-time engineers, and over the course of the entire project so far, we've made 8,000 commits to Git, Git being our version control system, so that each one of those commits is a change saying, hey, this is like an improvement to the code. And that 8,000 times. Our code base size right now is about 250,000 lines of code. That's pretty substantial. We're getting to the size of a pretty big code base. And I did want to share, this chart kind of shows the lines of code that were added over time. And you kind of see 2 big spikes here. And this one was when we did our backend overhaul. And here is where we went for iPhone. So those were really substantial chunks of code that suddenly got added to our repository. And you can see kind of trailing off at the end. It's not a bad thing. That's actually a good thing. See some of the things that we've been working on this quarter actually have to do with refactoring, cleaning up, making things easier to change, more efficient, faster, better, which can result in a lower number of lines of code. That's not a bad thing. It could be a good thing. We've done 172 releases to the mobile app, the updates to the mobile app. Again, this is pretty substantial. You're thinking about like other companies that do updates to their apps, they might be doing them every couple of weeks, maybe months even. We try to do these pretty frequently, 172 over the course of just a couple of years. It's a lot. 650 releases to the backend. This includes like that desk, that administrative tool, and the API that's driving everything. 650 again over just the course of a couple of years. You could think we're doing, you know, almost one a day. And that's also like a pace that we're pretty proud of. We want to touch on who we are and what we do in the engineering team. We're smart, passionate, interested, and interesting engineers who care about having an impact on our customers' lives. And why am I saying that? I think the one thing that really differentiates our engineering team from a lot of our other companies is how involved people feel. The engineers, like, we actually care, like, you know, whether or not, you know, features that go out, things are working, things are improving people's lives. You can see that in the way that, like, we work with our customer support to, like, resolve issues, the way that, like, people will stay up all night to fix things, make sure things are running smoothly. But three main things that we do in engineering: build, monitor, respond, and learn and improve. So building, what we do is we take complex things, simplify them, and make those concepts a reality. Some great examples of that is our ILP, the Independent Liquidity Provider and Banking Automation Network. Extremely complex system connecting the, you know, end customers to the ILPs, plus the automation tools that we've had to make these transactions move very quickly. Incredibly complex, but from a customer's perspective, from the end user, it's just clicking a couple things, filling out some small fields, and everything else is taken care of. A lot of thought and design and efforts put into making things work that way. Same thing with KYC and compliance, working on like an international scale. There's this large complexity of rules and limits and tiers and how things should work and who's allowed to do what for how much, what period of time. And we simplify all that. We make it so that, you know, all of that conceptual complexity is hidden away by the code that we write, the efforts that we put, and end up with a interface that's straightforward and makes sense and explain. We monitor and respond. I just took a quick snapshot. This is not even that old. This is from today, of our one of our monitoring dashboards. We have engineers sort of peeking at these things all the time, watching. You can see like we have a pretty substantial like web throughput, over, you know, 50 to 100 requests a second. I mean, that's a lot kind of going on, and we're eager and we're happy to find and resolve problems that happen. We're not one of those teams that kind of like lets bugs pile up, issues pile up. Customers have difficult times. We like getting involved. We like, you know, people to feel like things are changing. People are working to fix things. The other thing we do is learn and improve constantly. Two examples that I just had, I touched on one of them. We were hitting a point where we were scaling. We realized that the system that we had started building wasn't going to handle much further scaling. We sat back and redesigned the entire thing and implemented in just under 2 months, I think, a complete kind of re-architecture of the main engine that ran the back end of RPay, to allow us to scale more. Another really neat thing that came out of our efforts, and actually the planning for iPhone, was we have this really neat design system. And let me shrink this down a little bit. This is an example kind of one of our current screens broken down by colors and components that show spacing. What this does is it's allowed our design team and engineering team to have this shared language that allows design to be implemented in code much, much faster. And so that was a neat sort of progression that our team sort of came up with in collaboration with design. I do just want to mention that we are still hiring. If anybody here is interested or has anybody they want to recommend, you can go to the reserve site, and there's links there to apply. And I'll kind of hand it over to Josh.
Great. I'm going to share our Q1 approach. I'm going to zoom in a little bit here with what we've been doing as a product and engineering team over on the RPay side this quarter. And so our overall theme when we jumped into what are we going to do with our limited but growing resources with so many things on our plate of directions we could go. So we chose a focus and we also invested in scalability. So there was a lot of viable directions, whether it's in our highest growth market of Venezuela, different segments in that market, from consumers to merchants, different needs across those, or other markets that we were looking at opening or that we're seeing success in as well, like Colombia or Argentina. So there's a lot of different directions that we could be spending our time on. And so our goal this quarter has been to minimize complexity and maximize impact. And so we do believe we're still in like the pre-extraction phase. So when you think about a startup, as they've hit a certain use case and are doing it, and that total addressable market size is in the millions, you kind of really zone in and you just work on scaling and extracting on that piece of the mission. And so we're still putting a lot of feelers out. We know that our initial product market fit on a peer-to-peer and savings wallet is just a piece of what will be needed for a much more ambitious and much more global project. So we're not really doubling down on and extracting on those yet, and we're not overly optimizing. So there's a lot of things we could be doing to make particular pieces of the service much better, and so we're being cautious with building complexity into our system while really working on thinking big, thinking about that next utility beyond savings and pure payments. And we're going to share a bit about that here. So with where we focus this quarter, we've been using this theme of doing good to magical on our core service, where great for one core reason, which is we want to make sure our customers have an increased confidence with us as we're the place to store and continually more and more use their money. And so we've been doing this by solving, go ahead and open that, what we call like high visibility, high anxiety pieces of the service. And so quick little visual, top right quadrant is the things that we're spending time on. We define visibility as either public perception impacting or a high number of people with those issues, and high anxiety, right? So if you're trying to do a withdrawal to go buy groceries and something went wrong, maybe you made a mistake or maybe one of our services did, your money is stuck, and that's a terrible feeling, and that's a trust losing moment. You could be in a very difficult situation if you're trying to pay a bill. So we're really trying to make sure to remove those. And so some examples down there of some things that we've heard from our customers recently. And so what I'll read those, but I'll share this main theme of reducing human errors and human support. And it's good to remember about Reserve that with our tens of thousands of transactions that are being done a day, many are done because of our peer-to-peer nature. Many are done by customers in their fiat apps for when they need to, for instance, deposit more money into their Reserve wallet. And so unlike US API-based integration banking app systems where whether it's your PayPals or your Venmos, what have you, that have extremely low error rates, when customers are sending money peer-to-peer, they're human, they're involved. Our error rates, and this is about 1.2% right now. This is down significantly, but this is mostly our customers making mistakes. And so our goal, right? Well, up till now, we've been slowly improving, but it's been a very manual process to help them correct that mistake. So we've been spending a lot of time, and this is just an example from one of our Fig Jams, where we're creating new flows and getting into the next version of software that will help identify and help our customers correct those mistakes when they're doing peer-to-peer transactions. And another major area that we've been working on is making peer-to-peer easier, safer, and more viral. So these are what you've maybe been seeing, or what we've been talking about rolling out. They're pretty common, first world features that many of us get to enjoy in their banking apps if we're from those areas. But people in some of these other areas of LATAM don't have them. So we've been working on making it safer to do payments to strangers that you're interacting and doing commerce with, or businesses that you're doing commerce with. And so those are a couple of feature directions, and we'll probably share more details on those outside of the town hall. We could share more in the questions if those come up. So those are the major good to magical areas that we've been spending time on. While then, Matt, if you want to touch on the scalability side.
All right, thank you, Josh.
Oh, I think Matt's muted. And
okay.
To unmute. We'll go back and forth here. We'll go back and forth here for
now, Matt.
More minutes.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, so thanks. Yeah, sorry, I just had a cough. I wanted to make sure I wasn't blowing everyone's ears out there. Yeah, just I want to touch on another thing that we're working on is technical scalability. What that means is being able to take the resources that we have and the engineers that we have, make them more efficient, make our whole process more efficient, make it so that we do more things faster, like outside of just adding bodies, outside of adding more engineers. So some of the things that we're working on, we've made some pretty decent progress on as well, is increasing our automated test coverage. Before rolling something out, have everything as covered with automated tests as possible, so we know that we're not releasing something that has unintentional bugs in it. Improving our deployment strategy. What this means is how fast we're able to release things. We did enter a period where we were slowing down a little bit because of the complexities of being able to support, for example, different versions of the app being out at once versus pushing updates to those apps. It became a bit of a drag to make sure that everything worked together, and it's a very manual process. So we sat back, sort of reorganized that, and are implementing some plans to make it so that we can do that much faster, and basically have those releases not kind of slow us down. And of course, refactoring and code improvements, just constantly taking the time now to look at things, to make them simpler, to make them more comprehensible, with the goal being that they'll be easier to work on, which means that we'll be able to make changes to them faster.
Great. And this other major area, as we've been doing tech scalability and going from good to magical in our wall application, we've been focusing on discovery of expanded utility. And there are currently 3 major utilities of money that we're pushing hard towards right now, and we'll probably be talking about them in upcoming town halls. Not talking a lot about them right now. What we've done is we've built cross-functional squads that are doing pretty heavy discovery on them. New senior business development team members and research team members here from the product team that we've come in and that are working cross-functionally to get to these added utilities that we're excited for the money for the wall to have. And then there are a couple secondary ones as well that we're working on. And these will probably show up in upcoming town halls and upcoming discussions. But you can see, like, this is examples of some of the decks and some of the internal work that we're doing on these other I wouldn't call, yeah, maybe more abstract uses of reserve. And so but what we will share is maybe a few hints on what they are based on some customer insights that we have. And so I do want to share, recently we had a huge internal conflict at Reserve, and that was because Argentina overtook Colombia in active customers. And so that go-to-market team, a lot of excitement that happened there. Argentina's what is that? That's probably Usain Bolt now in terms of markets outside of Venezuela. And so this is a quick graph of the relative growth trend, with red being Argentina and recently passing Colombia there. And What are they doing? Like where's that growth coming from? Well, mainly it's coming from network money, about 80% in both countries. You can see what this graph is the percentage of people over time that are actively remitting money back to Venezuela. And so it's about the same with both countries. So even amidst that growth, roughly the same percentage of people have been sending money back to from those countries to Venezuela. But the growth overall for reserve has been pretty diversified here in Q1. So this is a graph of net new actively banked customers through this quarter, and only about 60% of it was not from Venezuela. So we're seeing a diversification happening across our open markets now, taking up more of our growth than Venezuela specifically. And there's been a shift this quarter in how people are using the app. So about a year ago, this is pretty interesting. About a year ago, our new active customer base, about 5 to 10% of them funded their wallet via peer-to-peer only. That means they weren't depositing any sort of fiat or other crypto. They were just getting money from other people already in the ecosystem. And so that was about 5 to 10%. And then 2 months ago, this has been creeping up. It was about 30% of our new active customers were funding their wallet from just peer-to-peer from other people. And so now the most common funding method is wallet funding via peer-to-peer only. So no fiat deposits, no other crypto deposits, just money moving around in the ecosystem. You can see that growth there. That's, I think, from the last 30 days, new active customers. And we've been peaking a little bit this, or we might share more as we get into it or later. But we're looking at like what are those users doing? Like why are their wallets being funded via peer-to-peer? And so this is one of the things that we're doing research on. But at a high level, pretty interesting. The majority of that is salary payments. So companies paying employees for their work in RSV, in stable money, receiving payments from goods and services and remittances. And so, like what remittances? This is a small sample size. I wouldn't hold these percentages too heavily. But we just did this pretty quickly for this discussion. And remittances, like what we shared for Colombia and Argentina, that's the majority of a lot of that growth. It's not the majority of the growth for the usage of money within the ecosystem. That's a lot of that is salary payments, goods and services payments. And so another quick visual on like the relationship between people that are receiving peer-to-peer payments. Friends and family makes sense, but yeah, that employer from salary is the big one there. So friends and family, employer, and then the obvious third one there is the customers. These are businesses that are receiving payments and only receiving payments from customers and not depositing fiat, just receiving payments. So this is this trend on interconnected stable money. Just one last visual here. About this time last year, 20% of our weekly actives had sent or received RSV. So like that red line there is weekly active customers who were sending or receiving money, and as the percent that have deposited fiat, was about 50%. A big thing a year ago was depositing your fiat. That number has been shrinking, or actually been holding steady since about March of last year. But our percentage of people sending or receiving RSV in the ecosystem has been gradually increasing. Now it's just eclipsed over 50% of weekly actives are doing some amount of RSV sending or receiving. There's some quick shares.
Thank you, Josh.
Product side, yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Okay. All right, we're gonna jump into my presentation now. Let me share my screen. And okay, I want to talk about two things. I want to talk about an update that is expected to launch in the next coming days to our website. And I want to talk a little bit about decentralized governance and how that is going to look for our tokens in the future. The first thing I want to talk about is this. So if you take a look at our website, which I'm sure a lot of you do, we have a significant amount of traffic to these different pages on the website, and especially the protocol page of the website. And if you go to the protocol page of the website right now, what you get to see is this, which is basically a bunch of texts, which is great for people that really enjoy reading these long texts, but isn't really super user-friendly for new visitors of the page, right? So we started thinking about this, and we came to the conclusion that we really want people that joined or that entered the website, especially that protocol page. We want them to be able to understand what Reserve is about or what the protocol is about in about 60 seconds or less. So catch their attention in 60 seconds or less, see if they're interested in the overall concepts. And if the answer is yes to that, then they can dive into the documentation. So, and right now we only have the documentation. And so I'm excited that we have an update ready for the website. And I want to show you what that looks like. So here you can see an updated page for the protocol website. And again, we anticipate to launch this in the next few days. And it starts with this large section that introduces what the Reserve protocol is about. And it shows this animation that which the protocol is all about, which puts together different assets in a basket and creates an R token. So a token to transact that basket with. There's a button here to read the docs, and the docs are still on the bottom of the page. So these sections that I'm going to show you are just put on top of these pages. If you go to the next section, so if you scroll down a bit, you can see two sections. One that introduces the Reserve's long-term goal, and I'm not sure if everyone is aware of this, but right now we're working with what Josh and what Matt has been showing. We're working a lot with the Reserve app in Latin America right now, but our long-term goal really is to create a stable, decentralized, and inflation-resistant world reserve currency. We've been talking about that since the original white paper. And so we've also added a completely new text that goes into all the details of that long-term goal. And we really want to put that in the spotlight because in the next coming terms, we're going to actually put more and more priority on that long-term goal. We also have a section saying anyone can create an R token. As you guys know, the R token platform that we'll be releasing on mainnet will be entirely permissions. So anyone will be able to create an R token. And you can see that in the ecosystem of Reserve, we think there could be many R tokens. And there's, of course, the insurance and the governance of Reserve rights. We also have this section, which will introduce some initial tokens that the ecosystem will have. You can see by the animation that R tokens are really used to as a currency, so they're used to transact between users. And we make clear that we have two currencies. We have RSV as exists now, and we have that new token that we've been talking about that is insured by RSR, and that also gains a DeFi yield automatically without having to stake or without having to lock up your tokens. And so we're going to have some documentation about RSV as it exists today. That new stablecoin, we still have to decide on the final name, but will be put in the spotlight too. And then, of course, Reserve rights. And we also have some new documentation regarding Reserve rights. And then we get to the actual documentation that we have now, which also has been updated. By the way, you'll see that if you click on one of these sections, you'll get to a page that you haven't seen before that explains everything you want to know about where we are now and where we're going into future. So this is a small update, but very interesting especially for new visitors of the website. All right, and the second part I want to talk about is decentralized governance for our token. I want to talk about this part because it's actually going to be a very relevant part, and as time goes on, it's going to be more and more important for the protocol, but we haven't put too many emphasis on decentralized governance so far. And I want to walk you through how we think of decentralized governance, how initial governance for our tokens is going to look like. But I'm going to start from scratch because there might be some people in this Zoom call that are not very familiar with decentralized governance for cryptocurrencies. And so I want to give you a bit of that information, that background information. And I want to start with an easy question. What is governance? And I have two definitions of governance here, but I'm going to keep it simple. Governance is the system by which an organization, a product, or a protocol is controlled and operates. And what is essential to governance is that the people that govern that protocol or that product need to balance the interests of a company, product, or protocol's many stakeholders. And so what that basically means is, I've tried to visualize it a bit. You have this company, product, or protocol. In our case, it's going to be an R token. And someone or that protocol cannot stay fixed. It needs to evolve in the future. So certain decisions need to be made in the future. And there's an entity that decides what those changes will look like. And so that process of deciding how a certain product will evolve, that is governance. Now, the next logical question would be, why do we need governance for an R token? Why can't it just stay a fixed design or whatever? And just like businesses or protocols, our token as a product will also have to evolve in the future. And the reason it needs to do that is to continue to optimally benefit both the R token holders as well as the RSR stakers. And I've put some parameters that the RSR governors will be able to change on R tokens. It's actually a way longer list than this. But instead of going through all these parameters, I'm just going to give a simple example that could really happen that I think shows well why we need governance for R token. And so for the visualization, instead of a product, we have an R token, and we still have that entity that needs to decide how an R token will evolve in the future, again, to optimally benefit the R token holders and the RSR stakers. So let's look at an example. Imagine we have an R token that looks like this, basically the design of RSV right now. So you have an R token backed by 3 other tokens. The way asset-backed currencies work is that the value of the R token is actually decided, or it's defined by the average value of these 3 tokens, or the average weighted value, I should say. Now imagine that some government comes along and they say that, or there's news of a certain government wanting to ban a certain token, which could definitely happen. Well, since the value of the R token is derived from the average weighted value of these 3 tokens, that could put our R token in some real issues. And so that's bad for the protocol, or for the R token, I should say. So what governance might decide to do at that point is they might decide to step in and exchange that bad token, or the token that is under regulatory pressures, for a different token. And in this case, as an example, I've chosen DAI, and DAI is a decentralized stablecoin in contrast with USDC, which is way harder to shut down by a government. And so the R token governors, or the RSR holders or stakers, they can decide to switch out that token for a more decentralized token. And so the result will be that the R token will stay intact. It will keep its peg, and it will be safe for the many users to hold. And now the R token has basically evolved to a new setup, to a new basket. And so I hope this makes clear that R tokens cannot just stay fixed. There's a lot of things that can happen, and so it needs to evolve in this way, or in many different ways. I hope that's a clear example. But then the next logical question is, okay, so we need governance. We need governance for our tokens, but why does it need to be decentralized? Why can't we just pick a person or a small group of people to do that job? And I have a bit of an amusing example here. There's much more serious cases, but I think the example will give you a good sense of what I mean. So why does governance need to be decentralized? I want to share a bit of a story here. Vitalik Buterin, the co-creator of Ethereum, used to play this video game called World of Warcraft. You can see his character right here. So he's basically playing this character in a video game, an MMO. And he says about that time, I happily play World of Warcraft during 2007 until 2010. But one day, Blizzard, which is the company that creates and governs in a centralized way World of Warcraft, they decided to remove the damage component from my beloved Warlock's Siphon life spell. So what that basically means is he has this very strong character in this video game, and suddenly the centralized entity behind that video game, the creators of the video game, they decide from day to day that they do not want his character to be that strong anymore. And so Vitalik says, I cried myself to sleep, and on that day, I realized what horrors centralized services can bring. I soon decided to quit. And so obviously you might think, well, that's a bit dramatic for a video game. Keep in mind, he's playing this thing, it's his hobby for 3 years. And from one day to another, a centralized entity or creators of the game can decide that his experience will suddenly not be that as fun anymore. And so I personally, I don't know what the best decision would have been in this case, if it would have been better decentralized, a decentralized governance for that game. But I do think that Vitalik and probably the majority of the crypto community will decide that yes, it will be better if, oh, and I should ask the question first. So I have a hypothetical question. What if instead of the centralized company Blizzard, all the players of the game, of this video game World of Warcraft, could collectively decide on whether characters should become stronger or weaker? And now that I was supposed to say, I don't know the answer to that, but I think Vitalik and the community would probably, the crypto community would probably say, yes, it would be better if the players could collectively decide on that. And so basically at Reserve, we follow this way of thinking. And so we'll end up with a system where the governance of that R token will not be centralized, but it will be decentralized. It will be a group of different governors. And in this example, I only have 8 governors, but in reality, it will be many more people, where the RSR token defines the value or the voting power in that pool. And I also have something to say about that, but I hope I'm kind of making sense of why we need this decentralized governance for our token. So the last question that I have is, what does decentralized governance look like in practice? So how will this thing actually turn out? How do you get a group of decentralized people, maybe anonymous people that don't know each other, how do you get them to coordinate in such a way that they can make good decisions for our tokens? And so if you think about this in the easiest way possible, if you think of the most simple design, you'll probably end up with something like this. And so excuse my drawing skills, by the way, but what this looks like is you have a process which starts, and anyone can propose an improvement to the R token. For example, change the collateral token X to collateral token Y. And in this simple design, basically, you just have 2 baskets where people can put in their RSR. You have a for basket and an against basket. And then you ask a very simple question. Did more than 50% vote yes? And by the way, this 50% goes to the RSR. So it's about the RSR, not the amount of people that vote. If the answer is yes, you execute the proposal. If the answer is no, you do not execute the proposal. Now, this design is way too simple. And in practice, it has actually failed. It's been tested and it's been seen that this system does not work at all. And so you're going to have to, or the crypto world right now has evolved to a bit more of a more complex system. And I want to show you this because this system that I'm going to show you will also be the system that we will apply for our tokens initially. And it looks like this. And you can see directly that it's a bit more complicated. So what decentralized governance initially for our tokens is going to look like is the process starts with anyone being able to create what's called an RFC, a request for comments. And that request for comment is basically a forum post of someone saying, I think I want to, or I think this would be a good idea to change for an art token. And that forum post allows for thorough discussions on that forum about that change. That RFC will be linked to a snapshot vote. And a snapshot vote, for those that don't know what that is, that's basically a voting mechanism to allow people to vote with their tokens, in our case with their RSR tokens, but it will be off-chain. So you won't have to pay for gas fees. And we'll still have those baskets, the for and the against baskets, and people will be able to vote off-chain. After the RFC has been created, we will have a 3-day waiting period. And at that point, we're already going to query if more than 25% did vote yes on that snapshot vote. If not, if initially like someone proposes something, and if let's say 80% of the community says, no, this is not a good idea for that R token, then the RFC does not evolve, it stops there. If more than 25% vote yes, then the RFC can evolve into a next stage. It evolves into an IP, which is called an improvement proposal. And the improvement proposal is basically a smart contract, also linked to these two baskets. And here we will allow for on-chain voting. So again, voting with RSR, but it will be on-chain. And initially we will use an interface called Tally for that, which is just one that we think is good for that. But of course, the voting happens in the smart contract. So anyone can use any other user interface to interact with that governance smart contract. There's a bit more complex restrictions on improvement proposals. We'll again have the 3-day waiting period, but we'll also require a minimum amount of votes that will need to be present. We're going to query, did more than 50% vote yes? If not, the proposal does not get executed. If yes, we'll have another time lock of 2 days. That is for security reasons, and eventually the proposal will be executed. And so now the way that I'm explaining this here, it seems a bit complex perhaps, but it's really easy, really. It starts with an RFC, discussions, off-chain voting, then the IP, on-chain voting, and then we get to the execution with some steps in between. Okay, one last thing on decentralized governance, and I think a lot of people already know the stance of Reserve for decentralized governance. Simple token voting as it exists now in many DeFi protocols is ultimately flawed. We don't think it is sustainable for the future of cryptocurrencies. And the reason we think that is the most obvious flaw you can think of in the current system is that one entity with a large amount of capital can easily buy a large amount of RSR tokens and thereby disproportionately influence proposals for their own benefit. And so if you want to know more about that, by the way, our lead protocol engineer, Taylor Brent, wrote a great article about that, which you can find under the decentralized governance problem on our Medium website. And I really suggest reading that if you're interested in decentralized governance. The way we think about decentralized governance is that the crypto world is going to need innovation in order to overcome these flaws that exist today. And that innovation will not only be necessary for Reserve, but for the general crypto world. And I'm excited to mention again that along with the Reserve community, the Reserve team will work on innovating on this front. And the amazing thing there is that if we manage to find solutions or evolutions to the current system, we believe that these will help the entire crypto world move forward. And we anticipate that if we find solutions that many other projects will also start applying our system. If you have, it says Slack, but if you have any questions for me about decentralized governance, I'm really excited to talk about this. So feel free to contact me on Telegram, not on Slack. Slack is for internal use. All right, that was my presentation. We have, let's see, okay, we're almost out of time. We have 10 more minutes. Let's do a quick update from Nevin for the R token side, and then we'll get a few questions. Nevin, are you here?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So yeah, I'll keep this very quick so we can have a little bit of time for questions. I'm going to have to hop off at the end of the hour. Yeah, and so I think maybe next town hall we can do a little bit deeper update on the R token development side of things. But I would just want to add a couple of comments that relate to what you just shared, Sinatra. So when it comes to decentralized governance and our claim that as that article image jokingly put it, one does not simply use token voting. I want to illustrate a couple quick examples so that people can start to wrap their minds around why that's important. So you can imagine a scenario where, let's say that the RSR that's staked on an R token is worth, say, let's say it's like 30% insured. So it's like 30% of the R token market cap is staked on that R token in terms of RSR. Well, that means that if those RSR holders could somehow steal all of the collateral that backed that R token, they could take, you know, sort of 30% of value and turn it into 100% of value. They could get, you know, sort of many multiples of return very quickly by just somehow extracting that collateral. And let me describe an attack vector that might make sense to pursue. So if you could manage to get a majority of voting tokens for a particular proposal, then you could vote for a proposal that replaces all of the collateral in the R token currently with a single ERC20 token that you have minted yourself and you fully control. Okay, and if you did this, then the protocol would say, okay, we're switching out all of these collateral tokens for this new collateral token, and it would start auctions between those tokens. But you're the only one holding that new ERC20 token. So you'd be the only one who could bid in those auctions. So basically you could purchase all of the collateral assets with this worthless ERC20 token that you created, and you could steal all of the money that backs an R token. So that's an example of sort of a catastrophic outcome that could occur if someone managed to accumulate a massive majority of voting tokens with simple token voting. But now let's take that one step further. And this is something that Vitalik actually pointed out in a blog post a long time ago. If you were to, let's say you couldn't amass a majority of voting tokens because that's too expensive. Well, you might be able to write a smart contract that executes this, that basically says, okay, there's going to be this proposal, and if you vote for the proposal, then that will be visible on chain, and you'll get your pro rata share of the winnings of the capital that we've stolen from the system. And so if people start to vote for that proposal, you might start to think, well, it seems like that proposal is going to pass. The more people are voting for it, I may as well vote for it so that I get my share of this collateral that we're going to basically collectively steal from the protocol. So the point there is that blockchains enable sort of like anonymous cooperation in a sense between bad actors. And so there could be even further attack vectors. Those are just, I'm sharing those examples to try to make the point that like these simple token voting systems that are used by Compound and Uniswap and many other protocols, depending on how you apply them, they can become quite dangerous over the course of time, depending on what happens with the token ownership. And that's why we are super motivated to facilitate much more exploration, much more research. This is part of why, hold on. There we go. This is part of why we are, this is part of why we made the R token protocol into a platform where anyone can create an R token, is to facilitate lots of experimentation and different ways of approaching governance, because many R tokens can be created with different governance mechanisms, and we'll see how that works. Oh, there we go. But it's also why we are starting to focus recruiting efforts on bringing people into work on governance, which will be done in public. So I'm excited that this has become a focus for us. We're beginning to recruit. We don't even have a public advertisement for this job position right now, because the challenge of coming up with novel governance systems is it's so difficult, and you have to have such specific types of knowledge and thinking processes to do it. And so for now, we've just been exploring through networks of people that we already know and searching actively for people to join the team. There's 2 people who it looks like are going to come on full-time to work on that governance research process. And if that gets finalized, then we'll announce who those people are, and you'll start to hear from them sort of posting in public on that research. So just wanted to mention that that recruiting phase has started, and I'm really excited about it. And that's the only update I wanted to give today. So why don't we, back to you, Sinatra, if you want to do any Q&A.
Yes, we have a few questions, and I think it's going to be perfect for the 5 minutes we have remaining. The first question is for Josh and for Matt. I'm not sure who of you can answer the question both best. There's actually 2 questions, and the first one is, it can be interpreted in a few different ways, but I'm just going to ask the question. You can answer it in any way you would like. The question is reserves code ever going to be open source?
Want to take that one, Matt?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. It's something that we have kind of talked about. There may be a point like far in the future. I think like right now it's probably going to be closed source for a while, but if we start moving things, you know, it's a longer term vision of decentralized everything as we're talking about right now. Having the code itself decentralized could be a step that would take. Likely not something in the very, very near term.
Right, right. And of course, the protocol code is already fully open source. You can find it on our GitHub. So that's why you can interpret that question in two ways. Okay, perfect. And then a different question, and I'm not sure if you'll be able to answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. The question is, since you guys are focused on savings, are you also planning on filing for banking permits?
This is an area that we've, especially from a US regulation standpoint, that we've been spending a bunch of time on. And actually from the corporation level, maybe Nevin, you'd want to share more on what we're doing with banking permits across our entities.
Sure. So I don't think that there's any country where we currently plan to register as a bank per se, but there's sort of a spectrum between bank and tech company. And in the middle, you have, you know, various different types of licenses for performing money transmission. So we're already registered as a money service business in the United States, and that allows us to offer some, you know, some financial products to people in the US. And then there are a number of different entities in different countries that we serve in Latin America that are in various different parts of the licensing process to perform the services that we perform today and possibly more in the future. One thing that we're pretty excited about is, in order to serve customers in the United States, like currently our status in the US allows us to do US banking transactions for mainly foreign customers, a few US ones, but in order to serve customers throughout the entire continental United States, you have to have a license in most individual states. It's a separate process, and we're in the process of getting those licenses. So some of them will be relatively fast, you know, over the next few months. Some of them will take actually like a couple of years because the licensing process is so complicated. Luckily, not too many of them. And so before too long, we'll have those licenses in many US states to be able to serve people directly there who have an address in the US. But again, that's not a banking license. That would be like a much, much heavier lift, and it's probably not a direction that Reserve will take.
All right, perfect. Okay, let's do one last one. And I think you can talk a lot about it, and you have in the past too, but let's keep it simple. But the question is, and I think it's for Nevin, this one, how does Reserve think about privacy in the Reserve app? And perhaps about what does Reserve think about private transactions in that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And it's a really sticky question because obviously there's a narrative in the world that private cryptocurrencies are just for illegal activities that are bad for society. But we've seen firsthand, you know, with our users in Venezuela and Argentina, et cetera, you know, if you imagine being in that situation where you're using this cryptocurrency as ordinary money, and as Josh talked about, people are using it as ordinary money, like the fraction of that incoming account funding that's from being paid by your employer within the Reserve app is astounding. Like, you know, there are just very few instances where cryptocurrency is this far along in adoption as ordinary money. If you think about using it that way, the privacy really matters. And currently, obviously, with people doing transactions in our own database, we're not revealing that information. So users effectively have privacy with these off-chain transactions. But if you imagine that you go into a grocery store and you buy something, and the grocery store then can see what your wallet address is and see how much money you have and see all the other transactions you did. And then like the person after you, you know, they pay, and now they can see, okay, my wallet was attached to the grocery store wallet, which was attached to that wallet just before. So now I know that person in front of me in line, I can see how much money they have and all the transactions they did. And I can see the grocery store and their funds and all their transactions. And, you know, we thought about, well, can you solve that by just having many different wallet addresses? And it seems like the answer is basically no. And so we've really just seen firsthand the need for privacy. I think that it's going to be important to undergo a cultural shift where people understand that privacy is not for criminals. Privacy is absolutely necessary for everyday transactions. And I think that I personally am betting that there will be many private stablecoins that exist on, layer 2 side chains probably, where I think that that's going to become an important criterion where you want transactions to be fast and cheap, and you also want them to be private. And so that's certainly something that we have in mind for future functionality that we offer to the user. And I think that that's going to end up being common.
Perfect. All right. All right, guys. We are out of time. I hope everyone enjoyed this first town hall. Again, it was a first test, and I encourage everyone to give us feedback and suggestions on how we can improve these town halls in the future. And that being said, thank you everyone for being here. Thank you for everyone that spoke from Reserve Side, and hopefully meet you at the next town hall. Bye everyone. Thank you.